The first shot came at 0647 hours. Private First Class Danny Morrison never heard it. One moment he was trudging through knee-deep snow, his M4A1 clutched against his chest, his breath forming clouds that the wind immediately tore apart. The next moment his head snapped backward, and a fine mist of crimson painted the white canvas behind him. He dropped without a sound. The soldier next to him, Specialist Wright, didn't even notice. The blizzard was that thick. Visibility had collapsed to 30 meters, sometimes less, and the wind screamed to the mountain valley like something dying. Wright kept walking, his eyes fixed on the boots of the man in front of him, counting steps to stay sane. He made it 12 more steps before the second shot found its target. This time it was Corporal Hayes, walking point position 40 meters ahead. The 7.62 millimeters round entered through his left temple and exited through his right, dropping him into a snowdrift that immediately began swallowing his body. Captain Derek Hollings heard the muffled crack of the second shot, or thought he did. In conditions like this, sound behaved strangely, bouncing off the mountain walls, getting swallowed by the wind, arriving from directions that made no tactical sense. He raised his fist. The column stopped. 32 soldiers. Elite infantry. 6 weeks into a deployment that had been classified as routine patrol through minimal hostile territory. Intelligence had been emphatic. This valley was cold. No enemy activity for 18 months. The extraction point was 2 clicks north, and helicopters would be waiting when the storm broke. Simple. Hollings pressed his radio. All units, hold position. Sound off. The responses came back in sequence. First squad, second squad, third squad, weapons team. Then silence where Morrison's voice should have been. Morrison, respond. Nothing. Hayes, respond. The wind answered for them. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more brutal from here. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of survival and sacrifice, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Now, let me show you what happened next in that frozen valley. Hollings turned to his radio man. Get me ISR. Sergeant Flynn worked the comms, his glove fingers clumsy on the controls. Drones grounded, sir. Weather ceiling's too low. They're showing 0 visibility above 200 feet. Then get me artillery. Same problem, sir. Fire missions are suspended until the storm passes. Hollings felt the first cold finger of real fear traced down his spine. They were blind. Completely, utterly blind. 32 men in a wide-out valley with mountains to the east, a forest line to the west, and nothing but open sloping ground ahead. The third shot came. Specialist Reyes, second squad, rear security, pitched forward like someone had shoved him from behind. The round had entered through the back of his skull. He was dead before the snow caught him. Now soldiers were dropping to their knees, scanning the white void through rifle scopes that showed them nothing but swirling ice crystals. Contact, someone screamed. We have contact. But contact with what? With where? Hollings ran the angles in his head. Morrison had been hit from the east, Hayes from the north, Reyes from the west. 3 different directions, 3 different positions. Either they were surrounded by a platoon-sized element with coordinated sniper teams, or they were dealing with something else entirely. Something impossible. The fourth shot dropped Private Okonkwo at exactly 0653 hours, 6 minutes, for men dead, and the medic was already moving. Her name was Rebecca Stone. 6 weeks with the unit, transferred in from a support battalion to replace their previous medic who'd rotated home. She was quiet, competent, unremarkable, mid-30s, brown hair always pulled back tight, gray eyes that seemed to look through people rather than at them. Nobody knew much about her. She kept to herself, did her job, and never joined the poker games or the late-night bullshit sessions. Some of the men thought she was cold. Others figured she was just professional. None of them had any idea what she really was. Rebecca reached Okonkwo's body and knew immediately there was nothing she could do. The entry wound told the whole story. 7.62 millimeters, long-range precision placement. The shooter wasn't spraying and praying. They were executing. She looked up, her eyes cutting through the snow, and in that moment, something ancient stirred in her chest. Something she'd spent 8 years trying to bury. The fifth shot came at 0654. Staff Sergeant Williams. Gut shot this time, not immediately fatal. He screamed, and the sound cut to the wind like a blade. Rebecca was there in seconds, her medical pack already open, her hands moving with mechanical efficiency. Hemostatic gauze. Pressure. Tourniquet. The wound was catastrophic. The round had tumbled after entry, turning his abdominal cavity into hamburger. But she worked anyway, because that's what medics did. That's what she was now. Stone. Report. Captain Hollings was beside her, his rifle up, his eyes wild. He's got maybe 20 minutes, sir. I need to get him to surgical. Surgical isn't coming. Not until this storm breaks. Another shot. Another body. Private Chun. 23 years old. Married for 6 months. A photograph of his wife taped inside his helmet. Crumpled into the snow with a hole through his throat. Rebecca's hands kept working on Williams. But her eyes tracked something else. The direction of the shot. The timing. The interval between rounds. 8 years. 8 years since she'd thought like this. 8 years since she'd measured wind deflection and calculated bullet drop and watched the way snow moved across a kill zone. 8 years since Operation Silent Echo. Williams grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for a man bleeding out. Doc, what's happening? Why can't they find him? Rebecca looked down at him. Her face showed nothing. Just breathe, Staff Sergeant. Focus on breathing. But inside, a voice she tried to silence was whispering calculations. The shots were arriving at irregular intervals. 47 seconds, 63 seconds, 51 seconds. Not mechanical. Human, which meant the shooter was repositioning between kills. Repositioning through a blizzard, across impossible distances, without leaving tracks that anyone had found. She knew, because she'd done it herself. Once, a long time ago, in a life that belonged to someone else. First squad established a defensive perimeter. Hollings was barking orders. Try to impose structure on chaos. Second squad, find cover. Weapons team, get me suppressive fire on that eastern ridge. The M240B opened up, its thunder temporarily drowning the wind. 700 rounds per minute of 7.62 millimeters, NATO screaming into the wideout. The gunner, Specialist Moreno, held the trigger for a full 3-second burst, sweeping across the eastern slope. The shooter's response came 11 seconds later. Moreno's head snapped sideways. His hands went slack on the machine gun. He slid backward into the snow, and the M240B fell silent. Jesus Christ. Flynn was beside Rebecca now, helping her stabilize Williams. That shot came from the north. The north? How was he moving that fast? Rebecca didn't answer. She was counting, measuring, analyzing. 11 seconds. Enough time to adjust to the changed wind direction, account for the shooter's new position, and deliver a shot accurate enough to hit a human head at, she estimated, over 400 meters and 30-meter visibility. There was only one explanation. Multiple shooters, Hollings said, reaching the same conclusion. We're dealing with a team, at least 4 or 5, positioned around the perimeter. Rebecca's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Then she resumed working on Williams. No, not multiple shooters. One shooter who moved like smoke, who read terrain the way most people read street signs, who had spent years, maybe decades, learning to become invisible in environments exactly like this one. She knew, because she had trained the same way, with the same people, in the same program, before they erased it, before they erased her. Doc, Specialist Wright stumbled toward her, his face pale with shock. Doc, Hendricks is down, 20 meters south. Rebecca looked at Williams. His breathing had stabilized. He'd make it another 10 minutes, maybe 15, if nothing else went wrong. Keep pressure on this wound, she told Flynn. Don't let up, no matter what you hear. Then she grabbed her pack and ran. The snow swallowed her almost immediately. Within 5 meters, she could barely see her own hands in front of her face. The wind shrieked, and somewhere ahead, she could hear Hendricks crying out in pain. She found him by following the sound. Both legs destroyed. The sniper had hit him in the pelvis, shattering the bone and severing the femoral artery. He had maybe 3 minutes. Rebecca dropped to her knees and went to work. Tourniquet high and tight on what remained of the right leg. Direct pressure on the left. Her hands were covered in blood within seconds, but they didn't shake. They never shook. Doc, I can't feel my legs. I know. It's going to be okay. It wasn't going to be okay. Hendricks was going to die. The math was simple. Too much blood loss. Too much trauma. No surgical capability. She could buy him time, but she couldn't buy him life. Still, she worked, because that's what medics did. That's who Rebecca Stone was. Even if Rebecca Stone was a fiction, the 10th shot came while she was tying off the tourniquet. She heard it. A distinctive crack, softer than it should have been at this range, which meant the shooter was using subsonic ammunition to mask their position. Someone screamed. Someone else started praying in Spanish. 11 dead now, maybe 12, and the storm wasn't breaking. Rebecca looked up into the white void, and for the first time in 8 years, she felt the old hunger stir. The hunger had a name once, before they erased it from the records. Before they dissolved her team and scattered the survivors across different service branches with different identities and strict instructions to forget everything. Sergeant First Class Catherine Reeves, 43 confirmed kills. Specialist in environmental invisibility, the art of using terrain, weather, and natural concealment to become undetectable even by thermal imaging and acoustic sensors. Operation Silent Echo had ended her. Not the mission itself, that had been textbook. 6 shots, 6 targets, a mountain compound in a country that officially didn't exist anymore. She'd been inserted by helicopter at 0300, crawled 4 kilometers through freezing mud, and established a position on a ridgeline overlooking the target. The intelligence package said combatants, high-value targets, terrorist leadership. Clearance came from so high up the chain that the authorization codes had more digits than her social security number. She'd taken the shots. All 6. Clean kills, center mass, exactly as she'd been trained. Then the sun came up, and she'd watched through her scope as the survivors emerged from the compound, screaming and crying over the bodies of people who weren't combatants at all. They were refugees, displaced families, children. Intelligence had been wrong, or intelligence had lied. Catherine never found out which, because 48 hours later, she didn't exist anymore. Her service record was sealed. Her team was dissolved. She was given a new name, a new assignment, and very specific instructions. Forget. Rebecca Stone became a medic. She trained for 18 months at Fort Sam Houston, learning to heal instead of destroy. She saved her first life 6 years ago in a Dusty Forward operating base in Afghanistan, a private who'd taken shrapnel to the chest, who should have died, but didn't because Rebecca's hands moved faster than death. She'd saved dozens since then. Hundreds, maybe. Not enough to balance the scales, but enough to let her sleep at night. Most nights. Now, crouched in the snow with Hendricks dying beneath her hands, she felt Catherine Reeves stirring again. The old instincts, the old calculations, the geometry of death that had been burned into her neural pathways before she'd ever learned to be human. She pushed it down, focused on the wound, on the patient, on being Rebecca Stone. But somewhere in the white void, the shooter fired again, and again, and again. By 07:20 hours, 20 soldiers were dead. Captain Hollings had pulled the survivors into a cluster around a small depression in the terrain. Not real cover, but the best they had. 13 men and women, huddled in the snow, their weapons pointing outward at an enemy they couldn't see. Rebecca was with them, her medical pack nearly empty, her hands crusted with frozen blood. Williams was still alive, barely. 2 others had survivable wounds. Everyone else she'd touched was dead. "We need to move," Hollings said. His voice had lost its authority. Now it just sounded tired. "Staying here is suicide. Moving is suicide too, sir." That was Sergeant First Class Grant, the senior NCO. He's got the high ground. All of it. "We move. He picks us off in the open. So we die here instead?" Nobody answered. The wind howled. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. A storm within a storm, the weather system feeding on itself and growing stronger. Rebecca looked at the eastern ridge. Through the snow, she could see nothing but white. But in her mind, she was mapping the terrain, calculating angles, measuring distances, building a 3-dimensional picture of the battlefield from fragments of memory and instinct. The shooter was good, very good, but not perfect. There was a pattern, a rhythm. The shots were coming in clusters now, 2 or 3 in quick succession, then a pause of several minutes. That meant the shooter was prioritizing efficiency over speed, taking the easy targets first, then repositioning for the harder ones. It also meant they were working alone. Multiple shooters would have maintained continuous fire, would have pinned the survivors down from multiple angles simultaneously, would have ended this already. One shooter, moving like a ghost through the blizzard, using the terrain and the weather to appear and disappear at will. Rebecca knew how it was done. She'd done it herself, and she knew how to stop it. But stopping it meant becoming Catherine Reeves again, meant touching the rifle she'd hidden in the false bottom of her medical pack for 8 years, disassembled, wrapped in oilcloth, serial numbers filed off, waiting for a day she prayed would never come, meant becoming a weapon again. She looked at Williams, struggling to breathe through shattered ribs. At right, pressing a field dressing against a wound in his shoulder that wouldn't stop bleeding. At the 12 others, their faces pale with fear and cold, their eyes searching the white void for an enemy that existed everywhere and nowhere. They were going to die, unless she did something she'd sworn never to do again. The decision crystallized at 0738 hours, when the shooter killed Private Rodriguez. Rodriguez was 19 years old. He'd joined the Army to pay for college, planning to study engineering, and build bridges in poor communities. He talked about it constantly, how he wanted to help people, how he wanted to make a difference. The round entered through his left eye and exited through the base of his skull. He was dead before his body hit the snow. Rebecca watched it happen from 15 meters away, watched Rodriguez's head snap back, watched his rifle fall from his hands, watched the snow begin covering him, as if the earth itself wanted to erase the evidence. Something broke inside her, or maybe something fixed itself. Maybe the thing that broke had been broken all along, and what she felt now was it finally snapping back into place. She reached for her medical pack. "Doc, we need you over here." Grant was calling. "Morrison's bleeding out." Rebecca didn't answer. Her hands moved on their own, unzipping the main compartment, pushing aside the gauze and the suture kits and the morphine auto-injectors, reaching for the false bottom that only she knew existed. The rifle was there, exactly where she left it 8 years ago, wrapped in waterproof cloth, oiled and perfect. The pieces came out one by one, barrel, receiver, stock, scope. Her fingers knew them like old friends. "Stone? What the hell is that?" Flynn was staring at her. So was Wright. So was Captain Hollings. Rebecca didn't look up. She was assembling the rifle now, her hands moving with mechanical precision, each piece clicking into place with quiet authority. Barrel into receiver. Stock attached. Scope mounted. Magazine inserted. Under 40 seconds. She'd done it faster in training, but her hands were cold. "That's a precision rifle," Hollings said. His voice was quiet. "Dangerous. Why do you have a precision rifle in your medical pack, specialist?" Rebecca chambered around. "Because I'm not a specialist." She looked up, and her eyes were different now. Colder. Emptier. "And I'm not a medic." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The wind screamed around them, and somewhere in the white void, the enemy shooter was repositioning for another kill. "Who are you?" Hollings asked. Rebecca stood. The rifle felt natural in her hands, more natural than the medical pack had ever felt. "I'm the person who's going to end this." "You're the sniper." Grant's voice was thick with sudden fury. "You're coordinating with him. That's why he never shoots at you. That's why you're always moving right before someone dies." Rebecca looked at him. "If I were coordinating with him, why would I reveal myself now?" "Because we figured it out. Because you know we're on to you." "Then shoot me." The words fell like stones into still water. "Shoot me," Rebecca repeated. She let the rifle hang at her side, making no move to raise it. "Right now. If I'm the enemy sniper, then you'll be safe once I'm dead. If I'm not," she met Grant's eyes, "then you just killed your medic." Grant's rifle was up, the barrel pointed at her chest. His hands were shaking. The others were watching, their faces slack with exhaustion and fear. "She hasn't been hit once," someone muttered. "Not once. Everyone else is dead or wounded, but she doesn't have a scratch. Because I know how to move." Rebecca's voice was patient, as if explaining something simple to a child. "Because I've spent 15 years learning how to not be seen, how to not be a target." 15 years doing what? She looked at them. The frightened faces, the trembling rifles, the soldiers who had trusted her to save their lives and now suspected her of taking them. Things I'm not allowed to talk about. Things that don't officially exist. She paused. Things like what's happening to you right now. Another shot echoed across the valley. Another body dropped. Private Martinez. Rear guard position, never saw it coming. Grant's rifle wavered. He looked at Martinez's body, then back at Rebecca. Prove it, he said. Prove you're not with them. Rebecca shouldered her rifle. She looked east, toward the ridge where she knew the shooter was waiting. Through her scope, she saw nothing but white, but that didn't matter. She wasn't looking for him with her eyes. She was looking for him with something older, deeper, the instinct that had made her the deadliest sniper in a program that officially never existed. 15 years ago, she said, I could have made that shot at 800 meters in conditions worse than this. Let's see if I've still got it. The shooter's next position revealed itself at 0752 hours. Not through sight. Visibility was still under 30 meters, and the scope showed nothing but swirling snow. Not through sound. The wind swallowed everything, including the distinctive crack of high-velocity rounds. Rebecca found him the same way he'd been finding them, by reading the battlefield. The shots were arriving from the northeast now, a subtle shift from the earlier pattern. That meant the shooter had relocated to higher ground, probably a rocky outcropping that intelligence maps showed at approximately 600 meters from their current position. She adjusted her scope, calculated the wind, gusting to 40 knots, variable direction, swirling patterns caused by the terrain funneling air through the valley, estimated the temperature differential between her position and his, factored in the atmospheric pressure, the humidity, the rotation of the earth. All of it happened in less than 2 seconds. All of it happened automatically, without conscious thought, the calculations running on mental hardware that had been installed years ago and never removed. Then she fired. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound disappeared into the wind. Through her scope, she saw nothing. No impact, no movement, no confirmation. But she knew. She knew the way a pianist knows when a note is perfect, the way a surgeon knows when a cut is clean, the way a killer knows when death has been delivered. 412 meters. Through a blizzard. First shot. The enemy's response came 8 seconds later. A single round cracking through the air where Rebecca's head had been half a second earlier. She'd already rolled, already relocated, already found new cover behind a snowdrift that wouldn't stop a bullet but would break her silhouette. Holy shit. Flynn was staring at her. Did you just... One down. Rebecca was already scanning for the next position. That was a spotter. The primary shooter is still out there. How do you know? Because the return fire came from a different angle. Because the spotter and the shooter don't share the same position. It's basic counter-sniper doctrine. You learn it in the first week. First week of what? Rebecca didn't answer. She was moving again, low-crawling through the snow, finding a new position that offered a better angle on the western ridgeline. The shooter was adapting now. She could feel it. The pattern had changed. The rhythm disrupted. He knew he wasn't dealing with terrified soldiers anymore. He knew someone was hunting him back. Good. Let him feel what they'd been feeling. Let him taste the fear of being prey. Stone, or whatever your name is, we need to move the wounded. That was Hollings, keeping pace with her somehow, his own rifle clutched against his chest. If you can keep him pinned, we can get them a cover. There is no cover, Rebecca said. Not in this terrain. The best you can do is disperse. Spread out, make yourselves harder targets. And pray I'm faster than he is. Are you? She paused, looked at him. I used to be the best there ever was. Then I stopped practicing for 8 years. A ghost of something that might have been a smile. Let's find out if skill like this ever really goes away. The next shot came at 0757. Not aimed at Rebecca. She'd made herself too dangerous a target. Aimed at Corporal Davis, who'd been trying to drag Williams to better cover. Davis dropped. Rebecca was already firing. 3 rounds in rapid succession, each one aimed at a different point along the likely enemy position. Suppressive fire, not intended to kill, but to force the shooter's head down, to buy precious seconds of survivors to move. Go, she screamed. Move now. The platoon scattered. Some crawled. Some ran. Some dragged the wounded behind them, leaving trails of blood in the snow that the wind immediately erased. Rebecca kept firing. 5 rounds. 10. 15. Return fire cracked past her head, close enough that she felt the pressure wave, close enough that a piece of ice shattered against her cheek and left a thin line of blood. She dropped flat, ejected her magazine, slammed in a fresh one. Reloading. No one answered. The survivors were dispersed now, scattered across 50 meters of the kill zone, each one finding whatever pathetic cover they could manage. Rebecca counted heads. 11 still moving. Williams was being dragged by Flynn, leaving a dark smear across the white snow. 2 others were down and not moving. Davis for sure, and she thought she saw Chen's distinctive red scarf half buried in a drift. 23 dead. Maybe 24. And the storm wasn't breaking. I need to get closer. Rebecca was talking to herself now, running calculations aloud the way she'd learned to do in training. He's dug in on the western ridge. 400 meters, maybe 500. I can't get a clean shot from here. You're going to charge a sniper position? Hollings crawled up beside her, his face pale with cold and fear. In this weather? I'm going to flank him. Use the terrain. Move the way he's been moving. That's suicide. No. Rebecca looked at him, and her eyes held something ancient and cold. That's what I was made for. She started crawling. The snow swallowed her within seconds. Rebecca moved the way she'd been trained to move, low, slow, using every ripple in the terrain for concealment. The blizzard was her ally now. The same white void that had made survivors blind was making her invisible. She covered the first 100 meters in 4 minutes. Not rushing, not exposing herself, just flowing across the terrain like water finding its level. The shooter fired twice during her movement. Both shots hit soldiers in the cluster she'd left behind. She heard the screams, faint and distant through the wind. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Every second she spent hesitating was another second the enemy had to kill. At 200 meters, she found tracks, boot prints in the snow, already half filled by the storm. Fresh, maybe 10 minutes old. The shooter had been here, exactly here, setting up for the shots that had killed Martinez and Davis. Rebecca studied the tracks. Size 10, standard military tread pattern. Deep heel strike indicating a tall man carrying significant weight, probably body armor, definitely weapons. She followed the tracks. They led northeast, weaving to the terrain with obvious expertise. The shooter was using the low ground, staying out of sight lines, moving like someone who'd spent years learning to be invisible. Like her, at 300 meters, the tracks disappeared. The snow had filled them completely, erasing any evidence of the shooter's passage. But Rebecca didn't need tracks anymore. She knew where he was going. The western ridge terminated in a rocky outcropping, a natural sniper position overlooking the entire valley. It was where she would go if she were hunting 32 soldiers in a wideout. It was where any shooter worth their salt would go. She angled her approach, circling wide to come into position from the north. The wind shifted, now blowing directly into her face, and she used it. Let the snow fill her silhouette. Let the cold numb her into stillness, became nothing more than another feature of the frozen landscape. At 380 meters, she saw him. Just a shape at first, a dark shadow against a white rock, barely visible through the driving snow. Then details emerged. Ghillie suit, modified for winter conditions. Long rifle, braced against a boulder. Prone position, completely motionless. He was waiting for his next shot. Rebecca raised her rifle, settled her breathing, calculated the wind one final time. 380 meters, crosswind at 15 knots. Mild upslope, target stationary. She could make this shot in her sleep. She squeezed the trigger. The round took him through the upper back, punching through the body armor and shattering his spine. He collapsed without a sound, his rifle clattering against the rocks. Rebecca didn't celebrate, didn't pause, didn't feel anything at all, because she could see the second shooter now. 200 meters to the west, already rotating to engage her, his own rifle coming up. She rolled left. The return fire cracked past her position, close enough that she felt the heat. She came up shooting, 2 rounds, 3, for driving him back behind cover, buy herself time to relocate. Multiple hostiles, she murmured to no one. I was right. Not one shooter. A team. How many? She didn't know. The original estimate of one had been wrong. The pattern had suggested a single operator, but now she was seeing evidence of coordination, multiple positions, overlapping fields of fire, the kind of setup that required planning and training. A sniper cell, maybe 4 or 5 shooters, maybe more. She keyed her radio. Hollings. Captain Holling, do you copy? Static. Then Stone? Where the hell are you? Western Ridge. I've engaged 2 shooters, 1 confirmed kill. There are more out here. At least 3, possibly more. They're coordinating. Can you take them? Rebecca looked at the terrain, the snow, the wind, the shadows moving along the ridgeline. I don't know, but I'm going to try. She started moving again. The next 2 hours became a blur of violence and calculation. She engaged the second shooter at 0823, catching him as he repositioned along the ridgeline. 360 meters, downslope, wind at 20 knots. The first shot hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second finished him. The third shooter found her at 0847. His first round came within inches of her head, forcing her into a crater that offered minimal cover. They traded fire for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of precise violence. Each round placed exactly where it needed to be to force the other into movement. She killed him at 0858 when he made the mistake of breaking cover to flank her position. 400 meters running target. Wind gusting to 35 knots. A shot that should have been impossible. She made it anyway. By 0915, the body count had shifted. Rebecca had killed 7 enemy shooters. The survivors of the original platoon, now down to 11, had managed to establish a defensive position in a slight depression that offered some protection from direct fire. But the enemy wasn't finished. As the morning wore on, more shapes appeared in the snow. Not snipers now, infantry, regular fighters, moving in teams of 3 and 4, probing the American position from multiple directions. Rebecca realized what she was dealing with. This wasn't a random ambush. This was a planned operation. The sniper cell had been the opening act, precision killings to terrorize and demoralize. Now came the main force, closing in to finish what the snipers had started. Flynn. She was back with the survivors now, her rifle smoking despite the cold. How many rounds do you have? Maybe 60. The others are worse off. Conserve ammunition. Only shoot what you can hit. Easy for you to say. We can't see shit out here. Rebecca didn't answer. She was scanning the terrain again, watching the shadows move through the snow, counting hostile positions. 14, maybe 16. Moving in a loose skirmish line from the east, using the terrain for cover. She did the math. 11 survivors, most of them wounded, with limited ammunition and no support. 16 enemy fighters, fresh and motivated, with the advantage of position and numbers. The math didn't work. We need to move. She grabbed Hollings by the shoulder. Right now, west toward the tree line. The tree line is 400 meters away. We'll be cut down before we make it halfway. Not if I provide cover fire. Rebecca ejected her magazine, counted rounds. 32 left. I'll draw their attention. You move the survivors. That's suicide. You keep saying that. I keep not dying. She looked at him, and something in her eyes made him flinch. Get them to the trees, Captain. That's an order. You don't outrank me. No. Rebecca's voice was quiet. But I'm the only thing standing between you and 74 dead soldiers. So you're going to do what I say, or you're going to watch everyone here die. Your choice. Holling stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Everyone up. We're moving west on my command. Rebecca didn't wait for the command. She was already moving, breaking east toward the enemy line, her rifle up and firing. The first 3 rounds found targets. She saw shapes collapse in the snow, heard screaming in a language she didn't recognize. Return fire cracked past her, but she was moving too fast, too unpredictably, making herself impossible to track. Behind her, the survivors ran. They moved in a ragged line, dragging the wounded, stumbling through the knee-deep snow. Wright had Williams over his shoulder. Flynn was pulling Chun, who'd taken a round through the leg. Grant was shouting orders, keeping them together, keeping them moving. Rebecca killed the 4th fighter at 90 meters. Practically point blank for a sniper, close enough that she could see his face when the round hit. She killed the 5th at 120. The 6th tried to flank her from the north, and she put 2 rounds through his chest before he could raise his weapon. The enemy adapted. They were spreading out now, trying to surround her, trying to pin her down so the rest could pursue the survivors. She let them, drew their attention, made herself the target, fired just often enough to keep them focused on her, just sparingly enough to conserve ammunition. The survivors reached the tree line at 0947. Rebecca was still fighting. She'd killed 11 by then. Her ammunition was nearly gone, 4 rounds left in the magazine, none in reserve. But she'd bought them time, bought them cover. Now she just had to survive long enough to use it. Stone, get your ass over here. Grant's voice coming from a tree line. She couldn't see him through the snow, but she could hear him, and that was enough. She broke contact, sprinted west, staying low, using every scrap of terrain for concealment. Rounds cracked past her, closer, and she felt something tear through her left arm. But she didn't stop. The trees swallowed her. Jesus Christ. Flynn was staring at her arm, where blood was pumping through a ragged tear in her sleeve. You're hit. It's through and through. Wrap it. You need to. Wrap it and give me a rifle. Mine's dry. Flynn's hands were shaking, but he did what she said. Bandaged her arm, sloppily but well enough, and handed her his M4A1. Rebecca checked the magazine. 18 rounds. How many of them are left? That was Hollings, crouched behind a tree trunk, his face pale with shock. Rebecca looked back toward the open ground. The snow was easing slightly. Visibility had improved to maybe 50 meters. She could see shapes moving out there, taking cover, regrouping. At least 5, maybe more in reserve. So we wait them out? No. Rebecca chambered around. We finished this. The tree line offered what the open ground hadn't. Cover, concealment, and angles. Rebecca used all of it. She moved through the forest like a predator, using the trees to mask her approach, the snow to muffle her footsteps. The enemy was disorganized now. Their plan had fallen apart when she killed so many of their snipers and shooters. They were regrouping, trying to reassess. She didn't give them time. The first kill came at 43 meters. A fighter crouched behind a fallen log. His rifle pointed toward the tree line where the survivors were hidden. Rebecca came up behind him and put a round to the back of his head before he knew she was there. The second was at 67 meters. He heard the first shot and turned, raising his weapon, but he was too slow. 2 rounds, center mass. The third tried to run. Made it 12 meters before she dropped him with a shot to the spine. The 4th and 5th were together, using buddy movement tactics, covering each other's advance. She waited until they were both exposed during transition, then killed them both with 3 rounds in less than 2 seconds. By 10:23, the battlefield was quiet. Rebecca stood in the snow, her chest heaving, her arm burning where the round had torn through muscle. The M4 hung at her side, its magazine nearly empty. She'd killed 18 enemy combatants in the last 90 minutes. Combined with the 7 snipers she'd neutralized earlier, her count stood at 25. 25 men dead by her hands, in conditions that should have made shooting impossible. And she felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not guilt, not satisfaction, not horror, just emptiness. The way you feel after completing a difficult math problem. Just a quiet knowledge that the work was done. Clear. She keyed her radio. All hostile contacts neutralized. It's safe to move. You got all of them? All the ones I could find. Stay alert. There may be more in the area. There were. The second wave hit at 10:47. 37 fighters this time, coming from the north in a coordinated assault. They'd been waiting in reserve, letting the first wave probe the American defenses, and now they were moving in for the kill. Rebecca saw them first, a line of dark shapes emerging from the snow, weapons up, moving with obvious discipline. These weren't the disorganized rabble she'd faced before. These were trained soldiers. Contact north. She was already firing. Heavy contact, multiple hostiles. The next 45 minutes became a nightmare. Rebecca fought like she'd never fought before. Not in training, not in the Black Ops missions, not in the years since. She moved through the forest like a phantom, appearing and disappearing, killing from angles that should have been impossible. Her M4 ran dry at 10:55. She picked up a fallen enemy's AK-47 and kept fighting. The AK ran dry at 11:09. She found a PKM and used that instead. At 11:21, she was down to a pistol. At 11:36, she was throwing rocks. And still they kept coming. The survivors were fighting too, Hollings and Grant and Flynn, and the others, holding the tree line with everything they had. But they were outgunned and outmanned, and slowly, inevitably, they were being pushed back, fall back to the secondary position. Hollings was screaming, fall back and regroup. Rebecca didn't fall back. She moved forward. She found a fallen enemy sniper rifle at 11:42, a Dragunov, battered but functional, with 12 rounds in the magazine. She took a position behind a shattered tree trunk and started killing again. 1 shot, 2, 3. Each one found its target. The enemy hesitated, regrouped, tried a different approach. She killed 4 more. They pulled back. By 11:47, the second assault had been broken. 22 enemy fighters dead. The rest scattered into the snow, their morale shattered by a single woman with a sniper rifle who wouldn't die. Rebecca slumped against the tree trunk, her body screaming with exhaustion and pain. Her arm had started bleeding again, soaking to the bandage. Her hands were shaking, finally shaking after all this time. Stone. Flynn was beside her, his face gray with shock. Stone, are you? How many did we lose? What? The survivors. How many did we lose in that assault? Flynn's face crumpled. 3. Right. Morrison, the kid from 3rd Squad. Rebecca closed her eyes. 3 more dead. 3 more names to carry. Helicopters should be here soon, she said. The storm's breaking. I can see blue sky to the south. You're hit. Multiple times. You need to. I need to make sure everyone else gets home. Rebecca opened her eyes. That's what I need. The helicopters arrived at 1,320 hours. 2 Black Hawks and a Chinook, their rotors thundering to the mountain air as they descended toward a landing zone that Flynn and Grant had marked with orange smoke grenades. Rebecca watched them land from the tree line, her Dragunov still clutched in her bleeding hands. The wound in her arm had been joined by others, a graze along her ribs, a piece of shrapnel in her thigh, a deep cut on her forehead where a round had grazed her skull. She should have been dead. By any reasonable assessment of the situation, she should have been among the first casualties. But she was still standing, still fighting, still watching. Stone. Hollings was beside her, his face unreadable. Let's go. Medevac's waiting. Rebecca nodded, started to move toward the helicopters, then stopped. How many did we lose, Captain? Final count. Hollings didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked, and for a moment, he looked like he might cry. 20, he said. 20 dead out of 32. 12 survivors, including you. 12. Rebecca looked back at the tree line, at the bodies scattered across the snow. American and enemy, all of them equally still. That's not good enough. It's a miracle. After what we faced, it's a damn miracle. No. Rebecca's voice was quiet. Miracles don't involve 74 dead enemy combatants. Miracles don't involve someone like me. Hollings stared at her. 74? You killed 74. Rebecca didn't answer. She was walking toward the helicopters, her boots crunching in the snow, her rifle still in her hands. The debrief took 6 hours. They conducted it in a sterile room at a forward operating base 200 miles from the valley. Medical personnel came and went, patching Rebecca's wounds while intelligence officers asked their questions. She answered some. Others she refused to acknowledge. When they asked her about her background, her training, her real identity, she stared at them with empty eyes and said nothing. At 1900 hours, they released her. No charges, no commendation, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. The incident would be classified, they told her. The official record would state that enemy forces withdrew due to weather. The 12 survivors would be debriefed and instructed to speak of the engagement to no one. Rebecca Stone would continue to exist. Catherine Reeves will remain buried. She found a quiet corner of the base and sat down, her medical pack beside her. The rifle was gone, confiscated by intelligence, wiped clean of any evidence. Just another weapon. Now, just another tool. She pulled out a small notebook, flipped to a blank page, started writing. 74. Names I'll never know. Faces I'll never forget. The pen moved slowly, each letter careful and precise. She didn't know why she was writing, didn't know what purpose it served, but she wrote anyway. 74 enemy combatants, all of them dead by her hands, all of them someone's son, someone's brother, someone's husband or father, all of them lives that ended because she made them end. The scales hadn't balanced. She'd known that before, known it with the cold certainty that came from years of trying to heal what she'd once destroyed. But she hadn't expected them to tip further in the wrong direction. Operation Silent Echo had killed 6 people. Today, she'd killed 74. No matter how she calculated it, no matter how many lives she'd saved, how many soldiers she brought home, the math didn't work. It never would. Hey! Rebecca looked up. Flynn was standing in front of her, his own wounds bandaged, his face showing the exhaustion that all of them felt. I wanted to say thank you, he said, for what you did out there. I was doing my job. No, Flynn shook his head. You were doing someone else's job. Someone who doesn't exist anymore. Rebecca's hand tightened on her pen. I looked you up, Flynn continued. Or tried to. Rebecca Stone has a service record, a personnel file, a history. But there's nothing before 6 years ago. Nothing at all. Before that, she just appears. Like she was created out of thin air. That's not unusual. Medics transfer between units all the time. This isn't a transfer. This is a person who didn't exist until 2017. Flynn crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Who are you, really? Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. Then she closed her notebook. Someone who made terrible mistakes, she said. Someone who tried to become someone else. Someone who thought she could balance the scales by saving lives instead of taking them. And now, Rebecca stood, her injuries screaming in protest. Now I have 74 more names on the list. 74 more faces that will never go away. She started walking toward the barracks. Where are you going? Flynn called after her. To sleep? For the first time in 8 years. I think I might actually be able to. She was lying. She wouldn't sleep. The faces would keep her awake all night, just like they had every night since Operation Silent Echo. But that was her burden to carry. Not his. Not anyone else's. The years passed. Rebecca Stone became Jennifer Walsh in 2026. Jennifer Walsh became Dr. Elizabeth Parker in 2031. Dr. Parker became a dozen other names over the following decade, each identity as carefully constructed as the last. She never picked up a rifle again, but she never stopped watching. The 12 survivors of the Mountain Valley went on with their lives. Some healed quickly. Others carried their scars longer, haunted by what they'd seen and unable to speak of it. Rebecca watched them all. She watched Grant establish a veteran support group in Phoenix, helping other survivors find their footing in a world that didn't understand what they'd been through. She sent anonymous donations to his organization every month. She watched Wright's daughter turn 4, then 14, then 24. She was at the hospital, in the back, unnoticed, when that daughter gave birth to her own child. Wright had become a grandfather. He'd lived to become a grandfather. She watched Rodriguez, the boy who dreamed of building bridges, wake up from the coma that everyone said would kill him. 3 months in the ICU, 17 surgeries, a recovery that the doctors called miraculous. He never became an engineer. Instead, he became a teacher, showing children how to build things with their hands. She watched Flynn write a book about battlefield medicine, then another, then a third. He became a professor, training the next generation of combat medics. He never mentioned her in any of his books, but sometimes in late-night interviews, he would allude to a woman who'd saved his life under circumstances he wasn't allowed to discuss. She watched Morrison, who everyone thought was dead, who had been listed as Kia until they found him in that snowdrift for the Pulse, recover from his injuries and become a high school principal. He coached the football team. They won state championships 3 years in a row. She watched all of them, 12 survivors, 12 lives that continued because she'd been willing to become Catherine Reeves one more time. The scales still didn't balance. She'd accepted long ago that they never would, but she could at least make sure that the lives she'd saved stayed saved. That was something. That had to be something. The end came in Montana in 2038. Lisa Chun had been the youngest of survivors, 22 when the ambush happened, barely out of training. She'd taken a round to the leg during the fighting and spent 6 months learning to walk again. She'd lived a good life after that. Married a man who loved her, had 2 children, became a social worker, helping families in crisis. Then the cancer came. Rebecca learned about it through channels that no longer officially existed. Within a week, she was in Montana, working as a volunteer at the hospice where Chun had been transferred. She told herself it was to provide comfort, to be there at the end, the way she'd been there at the beginning. But really it was because she needed to see, needed to know that the life she'd saved had been worth saving. She was holding Chen's hand when the end came. "I know who you are." The words came as a whisper, barely audible over the beeping of the monitors. Rebecca looked down. Chen's eyes were open, clouded with pain but somehow clear. "I always wondered," Chen continued, "always wondered what happened to you." The others talked about it sometimes, when they thought no one was listening. The medic who became a sniper, the woman who killed 74 people to save 12. Lisa. No, let me finish. Chen's hand tightened on Rebecca's. "I spent 15 years wondering if I should feel grateful or terrified. You saved my life. You saved all our lives. But the way you did it," she shook her head. "I couldn't figure out how to feel." "How do you feel now?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. The monitors beeped. Outside, snow was falling, the same snow that had fallen in that valley 15 years ago. "Grateful," she said finally. "Just grateful. You did what you had to do. You became what you had to become. And because of that, I got to meet my husband. I got to have my kids. I got to live. 62 people didn't." 62? The enemy. The ones I killed. And the 6 before that, in another operation, they didn't get to live. Because of me. Chen's eyes found hers, and in them, Rebecca saw something she hadn't expected. Understanding. "You're carrying that weight, aren't you?" Chen said. "All those names. All those faces. You never let go of any of them." "I can't." "Have you tried?" Rebecca didn't answer. The question was too simple, and the answer too complicated. "You can stop now," Chen whispered. "You watched over us for 15 years. Made sure we were okay. Made sure our lives meant something." Her grip tightened one more time. "You can rest now. You can let go." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do." Chen's eyes were closing, her breathing slowing. "You just have to decide to. You just have to forgive yourself the way I've forgiven you." The monitors changed their rhythm. The nurse hurried in, checked the readings, shook her head. Rebecca stayed. She stayed until the end, holding Chen's hand, watching the life fade from the last of her survivors. And when it was over, when the machines fell silent and the body grew cold, she stood and walked out of the room. The snow was falling harder now. Rebecca walked through it, leaving the hospice behind, leaving Montana behind, leaving everything behind. She had no destination, no plan, no identity waiting for her at the end of the journey. For the first time in 23 years, she didn't need one. Not Rebecca Stone, not Catherine Reeves, not Jennifer Walsh or Elizabeth Parker or any of the other names she'd carried. Just a woman tired, scarred, but finally free. The snow fell around her, covering her tracks. And somewhere in the white void, she heard something that might have been silence, and might have been peace, and might have been the sound of scales finally balancing. She didn't look back. She just walked, and the snow kept falling.